Welcome, fellow rotorheads. In this video, I want to cover how to improve your handling and control of sim choppers. I've seen a few people struggling and complaining about how difficult they are to fly. And it's definitely the case that they are a very irritable beast, kind of like me in my old age. But there are things you can do to rotor whisper them into something resembling submission or at least marginal agreeability. Some of these things I've covered before and some I haven't. Undoubtedly, many of you are familiar with them, but in case you aren't, this would be an opportunity to address all of them in one place. Now, I'm not a controller guy, as I'm trying to be as realistic as possible. Yes, I can fly with a controller, and I do sometimes because of vibrophile development, but it's not my wheelhouse, so to speak. Because of that, I'm not inclined to offer tips on how best to optimize your controller for helicopter play. I imagine there are others who've already covered that topic in detail, and again, I'm not an expert in that field. Putting that aside, let me suggest a few things that might help. If you have a joystick, you might find that removing the springs altogether and not messing with the trim might give you a more intuitive understanding of what the helicopter is doing. It does have a particular sense of how it feels and changes in accordance with particular phases of flight, and trying to keep its springs centered while adjusting the trim can be an obstacle to that intuitive understanding. The drawbacks are that if you're more of a general sim aviator, you may not like the idea of a stick that flops around rather than centers up. And it is true that real helicopter cyclics actually do exert a spring-like force as you fly, and adjusting trim to release that force is a regular and normal thing in heliops. Me personally, I fly without springs in the sim. It would be more realistic to put the springs back in, but honestly, I like feeling the raw control of telling the helicopter what to do without having to compensate for its mechanical shenanigans. If you don't have a collective, get one. I have a series on how to make a cheap one, though in fairness it's kind of involved. But you can also substitute a cheap racing handbrake, or so I'm told. Either way, the finesse of what you can do with a collective lever far exceeds something that is joystick mounted like paddles or whatever. As far as curves, I keep everything straight. The only adjustment I make is to cut off the reach on the pedals because I have them physically set a little far from me, and it's not super comfortable to push them full travel, end to end. Having said all that, as far as setup, this is what actual pilots have told me to do. For the collective, stick your thumb out and maintain contact with your thigh. This will give you a more precise control over the collective by intuitively communicating back to you how much you're actually moving it. With your thumb as guide, you can move your hand or even just grip your fingers tighter or looser to quickly and precisely adjust the control. This should make your taxiing more predictable and professional, and your hovering more stable and rewarding. As far as your cyclic, it's not super optimal to have it on your desktop or on the side or something. The cyclic is not an arm movement control. Arguably, it's not even a hand movement control. For the most precise control like hovering, taxiing, or cruising at altitude, you actually need to employ finger control. And to some degree, this is why I say getting rid of the springs could help, as it's much harder to be finger precise when you're pushing hard against an opposing force. The ideal way to get finger control is to make sure the cyclic is between your legs and your wrist or forearm resting on your right leg. Then you have just your hand to grip the cyclic with. Finger control for hovering, taxiing, and cruising, a larger hand-level control for shifting between flight regimes like hover into takeoff, takeoff into cruise, cruise into approach, and so on. A few years ago, an old helicopter pilot encouraged me to go take my first discovery flight. In emphasizing just how sensitive the cyclic is, he said, "You don't consciously move the cyclic. You think about it, and the helicopter will go there. Look where you want to go, and the helicopter will go there." And I don't think he was very wrong about that. It might be a little more than that, but not by much. It kind of reminds me of a funny incident I had decades ago on a descending mountain trail. I remember seeing a rather large branch laying part way across the path ahead of me. I focused very much on it, thinking to myself, stay away from that. Do not go towards that. Needless to say, that's exactly where I went, and by the time my wife had caught up to me, she saw me sprawled out on my back on the trail, the bike some distance further down. "What are you doing there?" "Just having a rest, hon." It would seem that your body intuitively goes where your eyes are looking, and helicopters are that sensitive that they follow as well, just about. Anyway, I hope this helps. I hope you learned something. I hope you found this useful. I look forward to your comments and questions, and until next time, keep the spinny side up.